A NASCAR Cup Series playoff race at Talladega. Need I say more to draw you in for Sunday in the YellaWood 500? And it's a fun race always to watch if you're, less anxious than I am, because I have a hard time watching these for sure. But it's also an interesting one for DFS because in the era of no qualifying, it could throw a wrench into our plans of loading up on place differential guys, taking advantage of the randomness of the finishing order because the good drivers are up front. So our job for today is to go back through past races with similar starting orders and decide, can we still go our usual route at Talladega or to change things up as a result of the way the playoffs break? Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Sunday's YellaWood 500. Lock is set for 2 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, so got about an hour after NFL is done to set your lineups, but honestly, I would just do it now. The starting order is set. We know who is starting where. We know how things are going to break. So I would just do your lineups now to avoid the headache on Sunday morning. So feel free to follow along as we go through the stuff for today. We'll go tier by tier later on, but first starting off with strategies for this race. First, though, a quick reminder to check out the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, not just for this NASCAR podcast, but also for our Week 4 NFL DFS preview via myself and Brandon Gadula, breaking down our favorite plays for this week, favorite games to stack, how we want to stack them, and much more. Favorite plays at each position. MLB podcast posted for Friday. We have UFC via Austin Swaim. And then, of course, PGA back next week as well. So a lot of good stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast. So you just search for that wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe and make sure you leave a rating and review as well, because those do help us out a ton. Hey, football fans, FanDuel is giving you the chance to bet on Week 4 of the NFL season. All you got to do is go to sportsbook.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Place a 3+ leg parlay, same game parlay, on any Week 4 NFL game, and if your bet loses, get a refund and site credit. Max refund is $10. Bet on Week 4 of the NFL season with FanDuel by heading over to the FanDuel Sportsbook today and placing a risk-free same-game parlay. Must be 21 plus and present in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issued as a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $10. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. A gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Indiana, 109 with it. For confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the red line at 1-800-889-9789. In West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net, or in Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. Let's take a look at the track breakdown here for Talladega again, discussing if we need to alter our strategy because this is a playoff race where the playoff drivers are starting inside the top 12 spots. And if you've been playing NASCAR DFS long enough, you know our optimal approach for the super speedways is to stack the back, take advantage of place differential, because the finishing order is a bit more random. There is a larger pool of drivers who can compete. There are a lot of crashes. So usually our ideal way to play things is loading up on drivers, starting further back, who can get us place differential. The problem, again, is that all the good drivers, or a lot of them, are starting up at the front. The 12 remaining playoff drivers are starting in the top 12 spots. So you can stack the back, but it means you're passing up on a lot of the guys most likely to win this race. Luckily, we do have races we can look at to see how we should alter things in this format. Last year's playoff race had the same starting procedures, and last year's spring race also had the top 12 drivers and owner points in the top 12 spots for the race. Both of those races tell us the exact same story, and we should use the assumption game and still get place differential after that. So it's very similar to our typical approach at Talladega. For new listeners, the assumption game is where you pick an assumed winner for the race and put that driver in your lineup. You get 43 points for a win, and you want those 43 points because it's a race where you can basically make it in the perfect line to get those 43 points no matter where you start. In those two races last year, the winner started in the top 12 both times. It was Ryan Blaney in the spring, Denny Hamlin in the fall. For both those races, those are the only two drivers in the top 12 who made the perfect lineup. So even though the top 12 playoff drivers, the 12 playoff drivers started inside the top 12 spots last year, there was still just one guy from those playoffs in the perfect lineup. And that one guy was the winner. It wasn't a ton of guys all the way in the back for the rest of the lineup. It wasn't like, 30th through 40th filling out the lineup. The spring race had nobody starting deeper than 21st. But the template of one playoff driver and then seeking out place differential is very helpful for us. That's what I want to do as my default for this week. I will pick a playoff driver as my assumed winner, most likely. My win simulations have playoff drivers winning 66% of the time. The 8 most likely winners are all in the playoffs as well. So more often than not, I am going to have one playoff driver in my lineup as my assumed winner, and the rest will be guys who can get me place differential. And we do have good place differential options for this week. We'll go through those in the tier by tier breakdown. So it is truly the same process we've always had at Daytona and Talladega. We can, get our assumed winner, get place differential after that, and go from there. We don't have to change things despite the fact the 12 playoff drivers are starting in the top 12 spots. As far as data to emphasize, we've got 3 super speedway races to lean on this year. There is some overlap between Daytona and Talladega, but they are very different. So track history, specifically at Talladega, will matter a ton for me this week. I know it's not like a hot take, but I don't tend to care about track history too much. I care a lot here, given the way the track sets up, given how different it is from Daytona. I do care about Daytona results too, but they are very different tracks. The other thing I will consider, which is typical at these tracks, is a team or manufacturer stack. They don't always pay off, but I'm still fine leaning on it because we've seen it enough on these tracks. Like last year in that Blaney race, 3 of the 5 drivers in the perfect lineup were Fords. Last year when Hamlin won, he was paired with his teammate at the time, Eric Jones. So if I decide to use Denny, Hamlin, or Kyle Busch as my assumed winner, I'll bump up Bubba Wallace for non-playoff guys because he's a Toyota, one of the few Toyotas in this race. Chris Buescher and Matt DiBenedetto pair well with guys like Logano, Keselowski, other Fords, Harvick, and stuff like that. But you don't have to do it. You don't have to stack, but I do tend to do it quite a bit just because we do see some correlated plays wind up in perfect lineups. So to recap here, it is still the same attack we've had previously at super speedways, despite the fact that 12 playoff drivers are starting in the top 12 spots. You get an assumed winner, most likely a playoff driver, and then you gun for place differential after that. You will get some guys deeper in the pack who can work for sure. And we will talk about those in the tier by tier breakdown. Lean heavily on Talladega history to determine who you want to lean on. Daytona history is okay. It's better than non-super speedway races, but definitely secondary behind Talladega. And then do consider stacking when you're filling out your lineup. So that is our strategy for this week. And I think we've got some drivers who mesh well with that approach. Let's go now tier by tier based on the salaries over at FanDuel.com and list out my favorite plays for this week. The elite tier is Denny Hamlin at $14,000 through Ryan Blaney at 12.5. And these guys are all starting in the top 8 spots. So we can just rank them based on their win odds. I'm okay glossing over this tier for cash games. For tournaments, though, I will be high in the 2 Penske drivers, Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney. Blaney has won 2 of the past 4 Talladega races. He constantly runs near the front, and he won Daytona back last month as well, or I guess 2 months ago now since it's October. So the appeal with Blaney is pretty obvious. Logano has had a lot of bad crashing luck recently, like got wrecked on the final lap at Daytona back in the winter. He has no top 10s since the start of last year on super speedways, but he is a 3-time winner at Talladega. He's had a top 10 average running position in 11 of the past 12 Talladega races. So when he's wrecking, he's generally wrecking late in the race. So as long as he doesn't crash, he's going to contend for the win. My simulations give Logano slightly higher win odds, but I'm going to go Blaney a hair higher because I love him. So we'll go with that. Blaney over Logano there. I obviously adore Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott. Chase has tremendous speed here. He's a past winner here. Speed does matter at Talladega. Denny Hamlin is the best super speedway racer in the sport right now. Hamlin always feels a bit better at Daytona than Talladega. That could be totally off. He did win here last year, and he's won here 3 times total, but I'm going to put Blaney first, then Logano second. I should put Hamlin above Logano, but I have a really hard time turning down the Penske guys here. Chase is 4th. I've got him at 5% win odds, so he'll still be an assumed winner at times, but I'll put him fourth in this tier behind Blaney, Logano, and Hamlin. The second tier is William Byron at 12,000 through Brad Keselowski at 10,000. Here, we get our first non-playoff drivers. Those are Bubba Wallace, Eric Almirola, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. They will start 19th through 21st. They're all in this tier, and I love all of them. My favorite guy here is Bubba Wallace. He's starting 19th. He is $11,500. He ranks 9th in my model's projected average running position for this race. And I don't disagree. Across the past 2 years in super speedway races, Bubba ranks 4th in average finish. The only guys ahead of him are Hamlin, Blaney, and Harvick. He has been better at Daytona than Talladega, but he led 10 laps here last year, 16 this year. His car has had stupid speed on super speedways this year. Like in Daytona, if he hadn't had issues, he might have won. He almost did win in Daytona. The second race, finished officially second. He finished third. He finished officially second after disqualification. But I've got him at 3.5% to win, which is actually higher than his implied odds at 32-1. So I love Bubba here, and I'll be heavy on him for sure. I think he is an amazing play for this week. Between Stenhouse and Almirola, I will give Almirola the slight edge. I like both a lot, though, truly. So honestly, I might just build around this tier in cash games. Like go with Wallace first, then Stenhouse, then Almirola all together. I think they're all guys who could win this race, and they're all starting in our desired range. So I'm not going to overthink it. I think those three guys are all tremendous options here. Among the non-place differential guys, Brad Keselowski is my favorite assumed winner. I have basically sent him out to pasture. I have not thought about, given any consideration to Keselowski for a while now because he's a lame duck driver leaving the team at the end of the year, which could mean he won't get much help this time around from Blaney and Logano. But honestly, like, they just wreck each other anyway. I'm just like so fed up with like Penske guys wrecking each other. So who cares? I think that Keselowski just too good here for me to be too low on him. So he's my favorite assumed winner in this tier, followed by William Byron. I'm going to rank this tier Wallace 1, Almirola 2, Stenhouse 3, Keselowski 4, Byron 5, and Kyle Larson number 6. The mid-range on FanDuel is Kyle Busch at 9.8 through Ross Chastain at $8,200. And we do have place differential guys here, and I'll touch on them in a second. But one assumed winner I'd like to be higher on than the public is Kyle Busch. He's starting second, so he needs to win to pay off, but he grades out really well in my model. It's probably a bit odd for him to do that because he has not won at Talladega since 2008 when he was like 12 years old, and he hasn't finished better than 10th since 2017. But he's always in contention. He has had a top 9 average running position in all 3 super speedway races this year. That's what you want from an assumed winner. You want a guy who, if the race breaks the right way, will be in contention, and I know that Busch will be there. So I'd like to be overweight on him relative to the field, and it shouldn't take too much to get there because people will choose Hamlin over him as an assumed winner, yada, yada, yada. So I think that Busch is going to be a good play. The place differential guys here are Chris Buescher, Cole Custer, and Ross Chastain. I would rank them Buescher 1, Chastain 2, and Custer 3. Buescher was a maniac in Daytona. I didn't like it at all. I've bet Chris Buescher basically every super speedway race for like the past 16 years, it feels like. So I was very concerned, but I think that was a lot of him taking a shot, try to make the playoffs. This is his final chance to do so. I would not be shocked if he goes back to being more conservative this time around. And plus, it worked. It made my heart want to explode, but it worked. He finished second before he got disqualified after inspection. So he was 6th in the spring race last year at Talladega. He's better at Daytona, but I like him a lot here. So I'm hoping Chris Buescher just dial it back a little bit, bud. I know you did some film study and found that you were not being aggressive enough, but let's just turn the dial back a little bit here and try to get to the end of this race. Chastain had a great car in Daytona too, both Daytona races this year. He was super aggressive, which is fun. I talked about, Buescher hopefully being less aggressive, but Chastain, that's what he does. I'm not going to talk him out of it. He had a 14th place average running position and led 12 laps in this year's spring race at Talladega. I already bet him to win. He was 45-1 where I was. It's longer than the 38 he's at FanDuel, so I don't want to bet him at the FanDuel odds, but I think he can win this race. And for DFS, I think that Chastain is pretty fun. Custer, I'm mostly putting here because he's starting 28th. Does have a top 10 in Talladega, so he's not bad, but I just don't like his skill as much at these tracks as much as Buescher and Chastain. So it's Buescher and Chastain and Custer among the place differential guys. Among the assumed winners, give me Kyle Busch 1, Kevin Harvick 2, Alex Bowman 3. The value tier is Ryan Preece at $8,000 through Justin Allgaier at $6,100. And my favorite play of the week is in this tier, and that is Justin Haley. He is starting 38th at $7,700. And typically, Haley drives for Spire Motorsports. That's fine. Like, they're better than the backmarker cars. But this week, he's driving for Colleague Racing. Kaz Grala finished 6th with them back in the spring. AJ Almendinger won the Indy Road Course race with his team. It's not elite equipment, but it's a lot better than Spire. So an equipment upgrade for Justin Haley for this week. He is amazing on super speedways. He's won. I mean, he did win the Cup Series, but it was more fluky. But 4 career Xfinity wins in super speedways. 2 of those were in Talladega, and all those wins came for Colleague Racing. So Haley is a top play of the slate for me. He's the first guy you lock in for cash games. I desperately want to be overweight in tournaments, even though I know he won't be sneaky. I think that he's still worth it for sure this week. Ryan Preece is the other guy I think is pretty fun here. Potential pivot off of Justin Haley. He is starting back in 28th, I believe. I lost him in my sheet. 27th for $8,000. So Preece is a pivot. Preece, 3 top 10s in super speedways the past 7 races. One of those top 10s is in Talladega. He finished top 15 the other 2 Talladega races. He's starting 27th, so I'm very in on him. I would also say that there is a tier of drivers in this range who are starting in the teens, and they are all guys I am willing to use and kind of hoping they go a bit overlooked in this tier. Those guys are Kurt Busch, Matt DiBenedetto, and Austin Dillon. Busch starting 14th, DiBenedetto 15th, Austin Dillon 16th. Dillon can win this race. He has shown that plenty of times in super speedways. DiBenedetto will have good speed. He's kind of like Keselowski, where he's a lame duck driver, so might not get the cooperation at the front, but really good the past couple Talladega races. Kurt Busch, skilled veteran, hasn't been as good in super speedways recently, but I think that Dillon, DiBenedetto, and Busch all in play in terms of guys who potentially could go overlooked because they're in kind of this weird dead zone in the teens, which means they're not going to be super logical place differential guys, but you're also not thinking that they'll win the race. So I think all those guys are pretty interesting. I'd rank this tier Justin Haley 1, Ryan Preece 2, Austin Dillon 3. I would go Kurt Busch 4, Matt DiBenedetto 5, and then I'll go Michael McDowell, followed by Eric Jones. McDowell and Jones starting a bit further back, so they do make sense, but I don't like their win odds as much as the other guys in the tier above them. The punting tier is Tyler Reddick at $5,900 on down, and I think Reddick is similar to Dillon, Busch, and DiBenedetto, where he could do well despite starting in the teens. He was awesome on these tracks in the Xfinity Series. He's been up front in the Cup Series, but he keeps making mistakes that cost him, and he said that. He is aware of this. He's working on it, trying to make it better. And the good thing is you've got more room for error in Talladega than at Daytona because it's just a wider track. So I think that's great for him. I'm still going to use Reddick, even though he's starting in the teens. And I think, again, all he of, him, Busch, Dillon, DiBenedetto, borderline, like they're not core plays, but they're like the step below that, like secondary plays for me. And Reddick and Dillon, I'm willing to stack together, getting an RCR stack there as well. I am similarly unopposed to Christopher Bell, starting in 12th, which is the lowest of the playoff drivers. And these tracks are not his forte. His average finish in the Cup Series is 24th, but he's run up front. He stacks really well with Wallace and the other Joe Gibbs cars. So if I decide to go with 2 playoff drivers in one lineup, it's very likely that that second guy, will be Christopher Bell. I'm going to rank this tier Reddick 1, Bell 2, Chase Briscoe 3, Corey LaJoie 4, and then Ryan Newman number 5. Let's finish up here with our win picks for Talladega. And I don't know how to feel about this because, again, I mentioned that Kyle Busch has not won at Talladega since 2008 when he was like 5. But my win simulations actually have him as the most likely winner. That's probably flawed. But when you're at the front as often as he is on these tracks, you're putting yourself in position to win. So I didn't adjust it. I ran it without adjustments, without other adjustments, and he was at the top. And I thought about it, like maybe he lower his upside, something like that. Didn't make any adjustments. I think it makes sense. So I'm actually going to go Kyle Busch as my winner for this week. He's $9,800. So he's technically my win pick below $10,000. Which means I could pick anyone for the second one. So I'll go Ryan Blaney. I just think Blaney is super talented at these tracks. He's been great at Talladega, specifically won at Daytona. Probably needs a win just because he hasn't been good on road courses this year. So looking forward to the Roval next week. Needs a win. He wants to go on to the next round. So I think my win picks this week, Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney. That is all that we have here for today. on the Heat Check Fantasy podcast. But again, a lot of stuff on here on the week 4 NFL DFS preview podcast, UFC, MLB, a lot of stuff next week as well. So search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe and come back next week as well. Plenty of more NASCAR discussion to come throughout this year. We got the Charlotte Roval coming up next week, also very chaotic. So going to be a tense couple weeks for sure as I'm watching the races, but it should be a blast from a DFS perspective as well. If you've got questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Enjoy the race on Sunday. Hopefully it's not too crazy. Again, I just have a hard time watching these races. They really get my heart going. So we'll see how things go on Sunday. Good luck to you. We'll talk to you once again next week to get you set for the final race of the round of 12 out in Charlotte. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.